In 1885, the Indian National Congress was formed to provide a link between Britain and India and to gain more civil rights in India. Exactly 20 years later, the Swadeshi movement breaks out in Bangalore. Indians boycott British-made cloth and goods. This event begins the Vande Mataram movement, or the One Zone Country movement. India was under the rule of Britain for most of the 19th century. Natives of India had little influence on decision-making. However, there were initially very few unifying aspects of culture that would have encouraged a nationalist movement. The many languages, the caste system, and the conflict between Muslims and Hindus decreased the likeliness that a whole population would join together. Nevertheless, a nationalistic movement began.
Many small events led up to the beginning of nationalism in India, but there were 5 main causes for this movement, as said by Syed Ahmed Khan Bahadur. The misapprehension of the government by the people, the neglect of the rulers to be aware of Indian culture, the substandard management of the army, the disregard for established practices, and the ignorance of the government all contributed to the beginning of the movement. India's nationalist movement was also partially influenced by other countries. Sons of rich Vaisya families sent to study abroad in Europe were inspired by the successful unification of Germany and Italy.
Additionally, Indians were influenced by the concepts of self-determination, which was fathered by the American President Woodrow Wilson. Self-determination is the belief that people should have the right to control their own fates and international structure. The Indian National Congress was a political party founded as a moderate reformist society by members of the British and Indian elite in 1884. The Congress soon moved to the center of Indian nationalism.
Muslims looking to protect their own interests formed the Muslim League in 1906. They were in opposition of Indian independence because they feared it would result in the takeover of India by the mostly Hindu National Congress. Illustrating this resistance is the 4 days of violence between Hindus and Muslims in Calcutta in 1946. Bal Gangadhar Tilak led a militant group whose goal was to achieve Swaraj, or self-rule for India. He led the Swadeshi movement, the boycotting of British-made cloth and goods.
In 1909, the British instituted the Morley-Minto reforms, which increased Indian membership on advisory legislative councils and introduced a separate electorate for Muslims, illustrating how the religious conflict between the Muslims and Hindus was present in politics. However, nationalism intensified in India after these acts because nationalists wanted even more rights, so they demanded more freedoms from a reluctant Britain. In 1912, the capital of India was moved from Calcutta to Delhi, bringing it closer to Britain.
Mahatma Gandhi felt sort of betrayed by the British when the Rowlatt Act was passed in 1917 because it caused a lot of conflict within.
In 1919, the Amritsar massacre caused mass distress in the people and in the Indian National Congress.
Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi brought his ideals and newly formed political skills to India from his education in South Africa. He was a major leader during the Quit India movement, as Gandhi was a proponent of non-violent civil disobedience, an idea gaining him both mass followers and the title Mahatma. Throughout India's fight for independence, Gandhi continued to push for non-violent protests, such as his non-cooperation movement in 1920. Gandhi continued to strive for Swaraj through civil disobedience, despite being jailed many times, most notably in 1931, along with 60,000 others. When he returned to the capital in 1947 after India gained independence, he was murdered by a Hindu fanatic.
From 1919 to 1922, Gandhi led many non-violent protests such as fast and marches across wide expanses of India until he was put on trial for sedition. In 1935, the Government of India Act is passed, which limited home rule with continued British control over foreign policy and defense.
Vallabhbhai Patel was elected the president of the Indian National Congress in 1931. The beginning of his revolutionary work was in 1918, when he led Gujarat farmers against British rule. In 1947, he became the deputy prime minister and was tasked with organizing 600 states into one nation. His work with the unification of India gained him the title, the Man of Steel. In 1942, the Quit India movement is launched by the Indian National Congress, advocating mass civil disobedience and an immediate end to British rule in India. However, Britain outlaws the Congress.
War between Germany and Britain outbroke in 1939. Britain included India in the war, though it did not wish to get involved. Britain had been fighting for so long to keep India as a part of the empire, but it decided to offer British withdrawal from India to get military support. In 1945, Britain recognized the need for independence and advocated an interim government.
So, was the interim government successful? Not exactly. Due to Muslim and Hindu violence, the interim government itself failed. However, this general election did result in both the Muslim League and the Congress Party being formed.
In June 1947, the two parties agreed to a partitioning of India. In July 1947, British Parliament passes Indian Independence Act. Pakistan became a separate country on August 14th and India on August 15th. Nehru was a loyal follower of Gandhi's, though much more political. He was elected the president of the Indian National Congress. He was the first foreign minister and prime minister of India, serving from 1947 to 1964. Nehru reluctantly agreed to the creation of two separate nations of a Muslim Pakistan and a Hindu India.
The result of this movement was India's national independence. Britain was concerned with India's ability to continue self-government, but India is still a prosperous, independent country today.